Okay, so the role of protein. Well, protein, the dietary source for protein is primarily animal products. And things like egg, milk, fish, and most meats. You can also get things like soybeans that are considered as well as the dietary source of proteins. Now, complete proteins are those things that contain all needed essential amino acids. And I'm going to put AA for amino acids. So an example of where you would find these are like eggs or milk, most meat, as well as soybeans. Incomplete is just that. It lacks something. What do you think it lacks? If you said the essential amino acids, you would be right. So legumes is an example, or nuts, or cereal is an example that you would essentially eat these and would not have all the essential amino acids that you would need. Now, how could you get all the amino acids that you would need? If you're eating something that's an incomplete protein or incorporates incomplete proteins, you can combine things. So for instance, if you take legumes and you combine them with cereal, those two things actually contain all the essential amino acids that you need. And so you can use a couple incomplete protein sources to basically produce complete proteins. So what are they used for again? They're structural materials. So something like skin, right? That's the protein keratin that it has. If you're looking at some connective tissue, then when we talked about that, we talked about collagen and elastin being examples of protein fibers found in connective tissue. And basically, if you have muscle itself, it's made up of proteins. They're also functional molecules. And so when you're thinking later, when we're going over digestion and we're talking about all those different things or proteins that break food down, those are basically enzymes. And there are some hormones. Now the dietary requirements here, basically the needs are reflected by age, size, metabolic rate, and nitrogen balance. The rule of thumb, though, is that it takes about 8 grams per kilogram of body weight that you want to ingest. And the American diet provides more than needed. So when we're talking about complete and incomplete proteins, what we're talking about are essential amino acids. And so if you look at the total protein needs, you'll see here, these are the essential amino acids needed to function. So tryptophan, you guys very much have discussed at some time in your life or another because there's a lot in turkey, right? And so methionine, valine, threonine, phenylalanine, leucine, isoleucine, and lysine are all for adults. Histidine and arginine are common for infants. And if you look at here, if you look at corn, it would be an incomplete protein source along with this bean or legumes. So what you can do is you can combine them together to get all the essential amino acids that you need for proper body function. So there are three factors that essentially determine whether amino acids are used to synthesize protein or to be burned as fuel. And so the first is the all or none rule. And so, sorry guys. All amino acids needed must be present for protein synthesis to occur. If they're not all present, then the amino acids are used for energy. Now, adequacy of caloric intake, what that means is proteins are used as fuel if there are insufficient carbohydrates or fat available. And hormonal controls. Basically, anabolic hormones, GH growth hormone, or sex hormones actually can accelerate protein synthesis and growth. So that's another factor that helps determine whether amino acids are used to synthesize proteins or to burn them as fuel. And so in the body, there is a homeostatic state that happens where the rate of protein synthesis will equal the rate of breakdown or loss of protein. And so you have what's known as positive nitrogen balance. And positive nitrogen balance is the idea where synthesis actually exceeds breakdown. And so this is where you see this is normal in children. There's a lot of growth happening there, right? Pregnant women. And for tissue repair. Any situation where you're looking at a lot of cells needing to be made. Negative nitrogen balance is a case where the breakdown actually exceeds synthesis. So examples where you might see this is in stress, burns, infection, any kind of injury, poor dietary proteins, and in starvation. And so if you look, this is just a table summarizing the protein or the summary of protein. So you can see that your food sources for protein either come from complete proteins or incomplete proteins. You can see on complete proteins you have egg, milk, milk products, meat. They give you example of the types of meat and soybeans. And in incomplete proteins, you can see the legumes there, lima beans, kidney beans, lentils, nuts and seeds, and grains and cereals and vegetables. And to end up getting complete protein sources, you can combine a couple incomplete sources. Now, the recommended daily allowance, again, for adults is 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. This is about 12 to 20% of total caloric intake. If you have an excess, so the problems that can arise from that is obesity, you can have enhanced calcium secretion and bone loss, and high cholesterol levels in the blood and kidney stones. Deficit, of course, profound weight loss and tissue wasting. There is a certain amount of protein that you need to make sure that your muscles stay strong. Retarded growth in children, so if you're not getting enough of those proteins that incorporate essential amino acids, then you're not going to get the proteins needed for structural and functional mechanisms in the body. It can also cause edema due to the deficit of plasma proteins, and during pregnancy it can cause miscarriages and premature birth. So the next thing that we're going to talk about are vitamins. These are organic compounds that are crucial in helping the body use nutrients. Most of the time they work as coenzymes, and a coenzyme is something that helps with the function of an enzyme. Now, most vitamins need to be ingested. Not all of them, though. There are two types of vitamins. There's water-soluble and fat-soluble. And so let's talk about water-soluble and fat-soluble. So water-soluble basically means that these guys are going to be polar because they can be mixed with water. So the B complexes, vitamin C, are all absorbed with water. B12 as well, but if you remember, B12 needed intrinsic factor in order for it to be absorbed. These guys are not stored in the body. If they're not used within 1 hour, they're removed or excreted. Fat-soluble vitamins are those that actually, these guys, so this is polar, these are non-polar, which means they love lipids. So vitamins A, D, E, and K are all absorbed with lipid digestion products. These are all stored in the body. Vitamin K is not. Now, it's like anything, they can be stored in your body, aka in your fat stores. So if you consume too many, they can cause health problems. Now, as you can see, most must be ingested for vitamins, but not all. For instance, vitamin D can be made in the skin. And this is if you have a newborn and they're having issues with jaundice or they're starting to turn yellow, you can take them outside and get them to absorb some of the sun, and that will help with this. Some vitamin B and K vitamins are made by your flora in your gut, aka bacteria. And things like beta carotene, which you find in carrots, right, can be converted to vitamin A in your body. Just to let you know, there is no one food group that has all the vitamins you need. So, are excess vitamins good for you? So for the big answer for that is not necessarily. Mega doses of vitamins are useless. And some of them actually cause health problems. It just depends on the vitamin itself. Now, they can be good for you. For instance, dangerous free radicals are generated during normal metabolism. So vitamins like C, E, and A, and mineral selenium, these are all antioxidants that neutralize these free radicals. And so, for instance, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts are all good sources of vitamin A and C. And the water-soluble vitamins, if you eat a lot of those, it's not going to be so much of a problem. You're not going to use them all. So you're basically paying money to buy vitamins that you're just urinating out later, right? But some of these that are fat-soluble, you can have serious health complications from them. So it's better just to stay within the recommended daily allowance. And so you can see here on here, vitamin B1, which is known as thiamine. You can normally find that in things like legumes, peanut, whole grains, and pork, right? And here they're a coenzyme, which means they essentially are helping enzymes work. A coenzyme is a non-protein compound. Right? And it's used to remove carbon dioxide from organic compounds. Now, if you have a deficit or extreme excess, so here is a deficit, right? Berry. And this is a nerve disorder. It's caused by tingling and poor coordination and reduced heart function. And so you see a lot of this. This is pretty rare in the United States. It remains a constant problem in the sub-Saharan Africa. It tends to break out a lot in the refugees camps. And this is something that's been basically talked about or described for thousands of years in places like Asia. And it became more common with increased, basically, production of rice. Now, vitamin B2, riboflavin, you can find this in grains, vegetables, and dairy products and meat. It's components of coenzymes like FAD and FMN. And these guys, along with vitamin B3, if you see lysine, that you can find lysine in nuts, meats, and grains, they're components of coenzymes as well, NAD plus and NADP plus. All of these are electron carriers, some for which you will see in the electron transport chain or being produced through cellular respiration. And so riboflavin or a vitamin B12 deficit can cause skin lesions such as cracks at the corner of your mouth, where B3 can cause skin and gastrointestinal lesions and nervous system disorders. An extreme excess of niacin can cause liver damage. So, and this is the first situation that we've looked at where extreme excess can cause issues. Now, B5, again, is a component of a coenzyme A. Coenzyme A is really important in what's called the intermediate step when we talk about going from glycolysis to the Krebs cycle. You can find this in most foods. And a symptom of the deficit of this is fatigue, numbness, tingling of the hands and feet. B6 you can find in meats, vegetables, and whole grains. It's a coenzyme used in amino acid metabolism. So you can get convulsions, muscular twitches, anemia, irritability if you don't have enough, an unstable gait, numb feet, and poor circulation if you have too much. B7 you can find in mostly vegetables, meat, and legumes, beans. It's a coenzyme in the synthesis of fat, glycogen, and amino acids. Here you can get neuromuscular disorders or scaly skin inflammation. B9 you can find in green vegetables, oranges, nuts, legumes, whole grains, and again, coenzyme in nucleic acid and amino acid metabolism. It can cause anemia and birth defects. Having too much may mask deficits of B12. B12 you can find in meats, eggs, dairy products. It's a coenzyme in nucleic acid metabolism and maturation of red blood cells. Again, lack of it can cause anemia, nervous system disorders, numbness, and loss of balance. So you can see with this, if B12 is important with red blood cell maturation, if you remember, you needed intrinsic factor to be able to absorb that having too much B9 can actually mask this. And so you can essentially have problems with making nucleic acids or allowing red blood cells to become functional. Vitamin C, most of us know you can find those in fruits and veggies and other citrus fruits, broccoli and tomatoes. It's used in collagen synthesis, so it's important in making bone and cartilage and generating your gums, and it is an antioxidant. It can cause scurvy, which is a skin degenerative disease, along with teeth and blood vessels. You don't really see scurvy anymore. It used to be very common during the move from the European countries and Africa over here, where they were on ships for a very, very long time, and they did not have adequate supply of citrus. It's not really so much a problem anymore. You can get weakness and delayed wound healing from that, and too much, you can get gastrointestinal upset. Vitamin A, you can get it as a provitamin in beta carotene, and you can get this in orange vegetables and deep green veggies and fruits and retinol and dairy products. And it's basically important to help be a component of visual pigments. It is an antioxidant as well. And so if you don't have enough of this, it can lead to blindness, skin disorders, and impaired immunity. But too much can give you hair loss, blurred vision, liver and bone damage, headaches, irritability, and vomiting. Okay. Vitamin D deficiencies, we know that you can find those things in dairy products, egg yolks, and like I said, it's made in human skin in the presence of sunlight that can help protect against jaundice, especially in children, babies. It aids in the absorption of use in calcium and phosphorus. We talked about this last semester when we were talking about ossification. And so it's common if you don't have enough that it can create rickets in children, and these are bone deformities, and it leads to bone softening in adults. Too much of it, though, can cause brain and cardiovascular and kidney damage. And vitamin E and vitamin K, you can find these mostly in veggies. Vitamin K you can also find in teas and colon bacteria. Where vitamin E, it's basically nuts and seeds. Vitamin E is an antioxidant, so it's going to help protect cell membranes, and antioxidants are important, especially when we start talking about mitochondrial function, that over time it starts to wear out and produces more and more free radicals. Vitamin K is important in blood clotting. We talked about that earlier in the semester. And so without enough vitamin K, you can get defective blood clotting, but if you have too much, it can cause liver damage and anemia. And basically vitamin E deficits can cause degeneration of the nervous system. So the biggest thing you can see, vitamins are really, really important, and you can see vitamins are non-protein molecules, right? They are basically necessary to help enzymes function correctly. And you can see in all these cases, or overwhelming majority of these, especially with the B vitamins, that they're important in making the important components of our body, or responsible for helping enzymes work, that important in making energy, or important in making certain molecules in our body. And having the right amount is essential. So minerals. There are 7 minerals that are required in moderate amounts. So for instance, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, and magnesium are all required. Others work in trace amounts. And basically, they work with nutrients to ensure proper body function. And so basically, their uptake and their excretion are balanced to prevent toxic overload. And so basically, things like calcium and phosphorus and magnesium are all important in hardening bones. And the magnesium is magnesium salt. That's there, right? It goes in a combination. If you remember, iron is important because it's essential for oxygen binding and hemoglobin. Iodine's important for thyroid function. If you remember, sodium and chloride, they're important for, or are the major electrolytes in the blood. They keep the homeostasis of blood in place, and they're also important in neuronal functions. And so some of the foods that are rich in minerals are mostly veggies, beans, milk, and some meat. And this kind of gives you an idea of the deficits, the major function and deficits. Like I said, calcium and phosphorus are important in bone formation, right? And not having enough of these can cause retardation in growth, possible loss of bone mass, or weakness in the bone itself. Sulfur comes from a lot of different protein sources, and basically it's the component of certain amino acids. For instance, cysteine is an important amino acid that contains sulfur. And so if you don't have enough sulfur, you'll get symptoms of protein deficiency over time because you're not going to have the right amino acids to make all the proteins you need. Potassium can be found in meats and dairy products, a lot of fruits and vegetables. They're important in nerve function and acid-base balance. So you can get muscular weakness, paralysis, nausea, and heart failure if you don't have enough of these. And when we talk about electrolyte balance, we're going to talk about all of these again, right? So I'm mentioning them here because they overlap in several sections, some for which we've already covered. Chlorine and sodium, both parts of table salt, you can get that, are important in acid-base balance, water balance, blood pressure, gastric juice formation, nerve function, osmotic balance. You can see all of those are really important in the body. And you can get reduced appetite and muscle cramps if you don't have enough. And then magnesium is a cofactor. And so with this, it's important in ATP bioenergetics, right? And without it, you can get nervous system deficits. So this is just basically a cofactor, is a substance other than the substrate. So something that is not being worked on by an enzyme that is important in the function of that basically enzymatic function. So cofactors are mostly metal ions. And most times they are inorganic or organic chemicals. And so these are going to assist during the actual catalytic process of a reaction. And so these guys are going to bind to proteins or enzymes to help. They can also bind to cofactors. And then, of course, iron is important in the components of hemoglobin and electron carriers in energy metabolism. And they can be energy or enzyme cofactors. And so, of course, you can get anemia and weakness and impaired immunity. Zinc. Well, we already know fluoride is important for maintaining tooth structure. So without it, you can get a higher frequency of tooth decay, right? And you can find this, we fluorinate our water now. You can get it in tea and also seafood. Zinc, you can find in a lot of meats and seafood and grains. It's a component of certain digestive enzymes and other proteins. So if you don't have enough, you can get a failure of growth or skin abnormalities or reproductive issues. Copper is, again, a cofactor in iron metabolism, and it helps to produce melanin. And if you remember, melanin was important in helping to color the skin to protect it from UV rays, right? It's also important in electron transport, and so you can get anemia or cardiovascular abnormalities from these. Magnesium, again, can get abnormal bone and cartilage growth, and it's a cofactor. Iodine, found in salt in seafood. They ionize salt now. That's the reason why we don't really have those problems. And we've already talked about this guy before too. It's a thyroid hormone or a component of it. And basically you can get goiters or enlarged thyroids that can push again the other areas and cause problems, collapse of your trachea if it gets too large. We don't really have this problem over here since we iodize our salt. Selenium is an important cofactor for antioxidant enzymes. Not having enough, you can get possible heart muscle deterioration and pain. Chromium is important. It's involved in glucose and energy metabolism. So your rate of glucose metabolism is impaired if there's not enough. And molybdenum is also a cofactor, and it has disorders in excretion of nitrogen containing compounds if you don't have enough. And so when we went through there, you realize that minerals and vitamins were mostly cofactors, right? They had some few incidents where they weren't. For the most part, they did. And in a lot of places, they talked about helping with different parts of cellular metabolism. So we're going to talk about what cellular metabolism is. And that's what we're going to go over in the next part of this lecture.